What happens when the cruelest man in Chicago's underworld finally realizes his pregnant wife's accident was actually a death trap designed for him? Hey beautiful souls, welcome back to the channel. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. I love seeing where you all are, and how are you doing? Really, I want to know. If you haven't subscribed yet, do me a favor and hit that button right now. You're about to hear a story that'll keep you up tonight. I promise you that. Snow fell like shattered glass on Christmas Eve. Marlo Hayes stood outside the iron gates of the Fontana estate, her breath coming in shallow gasps that had nothing to do with the cold. 7 months pregnant, her body swayed in the wind that cut through Chicago's Gold Coast like a blade. The mansion loomed before her, every window blazing with golden light. Inside, Gianluca's family celebrated, laughter and music spilling into the night, while she froze on the other side of his cruelty. He'd locked her out 3 hours ago. No coat, no phone. Just the thin black dress she'd worn to his mother's dinner, and the secret she'd been feeding her body for the past 4 months. Her vision blurred, right on schedule. Marlo pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the baby kick. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but this is the only way to save you." The tiny vial in her clutch was almost empty now. She'd taken the last dose an hour ago, just enough to push her symptoms into visibility without crossing the line into permanent damage. She'd studied the measurements obsessively, walked the razor's edge between victim and architect. The gates stayed closed. Through the frosted windows, she could see Gianluca's silhouette. Broad shoulders, commanding presence, the man Chicago feared. He saw her. She knew he saw her. He'd glanced out twice already, his expression carved from the same ice that coated the driveway. This was the test. This was everything. Her knees buckled. Not an act this time. The toxins made sure of that. She went down hard, her body hitting the snow-covered concrete with a sound that echoed in the silent street. Pain shot through her hip, her shoulder, her wrist. The baby kicked frantically, responding to her spiking heart rate. "Help," she called out, but her voice was thread-thin, lost in the wind. Inside, the music played on. Gianluca turned away from the window. Marlo's fingers dug into the snow. Blood roared in her ears. She'd planned this moment for months. The timing, the witnesses, the way his own family's code would devour him once they discovered what he'd done. The Fontana Familia operated on iron rules. Protect your blood, especially the women carrying the next generation. Abandonment was betrayal. Betrayal was death. But lying here in the dark, baby moving inside her, poison creeping through her veins in carefully measured doses, Marlo felt something she hadn't anticipated. Terror. Not of dying. She'd calculated those risks down to the milligram. Terror that she'd miscalculated him. That Gianluca's hatred ran deeper than his family's honor. That he'd let her freeze rather than open the door, and her entire plan would die with her in the snow. Headlights swept across the street. A car slowed. Through her fading vision, Marlo recognized the vehicle. Gianluca's underboss, Santo Messina, returning from a collection run. His wife Sophia was in the passenger seat, her face pressed against the window, eyes wide with horror. The car doors flew open. "Marlo!" Sophia's scream cut through the night. "Oh my God, Santo, she's not moving! The baby—" Santo was already running toward the gate, his phone out, shouting orders. The electronic lock buzzed. The gates swung open. Inside the mansion, the music stopped. Marlo's lips curved into the faintest smile before her eyes rolled back. The trap was sprung. Let the game begin. The emergency room lights burned like accusation. Marlo drifted between consciousness and shadow, her body wired to machines that beeped urgent warnings into the sterile air. Her baby's heartbeat filled the room, strong, steady, alive. That sound was the only thing tethering her to this moment. Gianluca stood in the corner, perfectly still. His $3,000 suit didn't have a single wrinkle. His dark hair was immaculate, styled back from a face that could have been carved by Renaissance masters, all sharp angles and cold beauty. At 34, he commanded Chicago's largest crime syndicate, with the same precision he used to knot his silk ties. Nothing touched him, nothing moved him, except now something had. 7 months pregnant Gianluca. His mother's voice cut through the room like a whip. Bianca Fontana stood at 5'3", but she carried the authority of the entire Familia bloodline. Silver threaded through her black hair, and her eyes held the kind of judgment that had broken stronger men than her son. Your wife, your child, left in the snow like garbage. She was being dramatic. His voice was flat, emotionless. Marlo always makes scenes when she doesn't get her way. Marlo's fingers tightened on the hospital sheets. There it was, the weapon he'd used against her for 18 months. Every time she'd protested his cruelty, he'd called her dramatic. Every time she'd begged him to stop humiliating her in front of his associates, he'd told her she was too sensitive. When she'd cried after he'd locked her in their bedroom for 3 days, he'd convinced his family she was unstable, hormonal, imagining things. Gaslighting. The word tasted like poison in her mouth. Appropriate, considering. The doctors found toxins in her system. Santo Messina stepped into the room, his phone screen illuminating his weathered face. At 48, Gianluca's underboss carried the scars of 30 years in the life. A crooked nose, knuckles that had been broken and reset, a bullet, wound that left him limping in cold weather. But his loyalty was absolute. Preliminary tests show gradual exposure, weeks, maybe months. The room went silent. Gianluca's expression didn't change. That's impossible. She eats what I eat, drinks what I drink. Does she? Bianca's question landed like a blade. When's the last time you shared a meal with your pregnant wife? When's the last time you were even in the same room longer than 5 minutes? Marlo watched him through half-closed eyes. This was the performance of her life, and she couldn't afford a single mistake. She let her breath hitch, her hand drift to her belly, her face contort with carefully practiced pain. The machines responded, heart rate spiking just enough to pull attention. A nurse rushed over, checked her vitals, adjusted an IV. She needs rest. Everyone out except immediate family. I'm her husband. Gianluca moved toward the bed for the first time. Marlo flinched. She didn't have to fake it. Her body had learned to recoil from him months ago, back when his psychological torture had started bleeding into casual cruelty. The small bruises he'd leave on her wrist when she talked back. The way he'd grip her arm hard enough to leave fingerprints when she embarrassed him at dinner. Nothing his family could see, nothing she could prove, until now. Get away from her! Bianca's command stopped him mid-step. Until we understand what's happening, you don't touch her. Family rules, Gianluca. You know them as well as I do. His jaw tightened. For a moment, Marlo saw something flicker behind those ice-blue eyes. Not concern, but calculation. He was already thinking 3 moves ahead, the way he always did, the way that made him dangerous. Fine, he stepped back. But when she wakes up, she'll tell you the truth, that I've done nothing wrong. He left without looking back. Sofia Messina slipped into the chair beside Marlo's bed once the room cleared. At 26, she was closest to Marlo's age, the only woman in the Familia who'd tried to befriend her. Her dark eyes were red from crying. I should have seen it, Sofia whispered. The way he treated you at dinners, the things he'd say. I thought, God, Marlo, I thought you were just having a rough pregnancy. I didn't realize he was... Marlo's hand found Sofia's. She squeezed once, gentle but deliberate. Sofia's breath caught. You're awake. Don't tell anyone. Marlo's voice was barely audible. Not yet. I need you to trust me, Sofia. Can you do that? The younger woman stared at her, confusion and fear warring across her face. Then slowly she nodded. What's happening? Marlo's smile was thin and sharp as a razor. Justice. The toxicology report landed on Santo Messina's desk at dawn. He read it 3 times before calling the emergency meeting, because what it contained didn't just threaten Gianluca, it threatened the entire Fontana organization's foundation. Arsenic. Trace. Amounts administered over approximately 16 weeks. Enough to cause symptoms, dizziness, nausea, weakness, confusion, but carefully calibrated to avoid permanent damage to mother or child. The pattern suggested intentional, calculated exposure. Someone had been poisoning Marlo Hayes Fontana. The Familia gathered in the private room of Gianluca's restaurant, Il Corvo Nero, the Black Crow. 15 men, 3 women, all bound by blood or oath to the Fontana name. Bianca sat at the head of the table, the matriarch position she'd claimed after her husband's death 6 years ago. Gianluca stood against the wall, arms crossed, face unreadable. The evidence is clear. Santos spread the medical documents across the polished wood. Someone's been poisoning her. The question is who? And why? Bianca's fingers drummed against the table. Marlo has no enemies. She barely leaves the house. Exactly. Gianluca finally spoke, his voice cutting through the murmurs. She has no life outside our marriage. No friends, no family in Chicago, no connections. The only people who have access to her are in this room. The implication hung heavy. He was suggesting one of them had done this. You're deflecting. Sophia's voice was quiet but firm. Santos shot her a warning look, but she continued. Everyone here knows how you treat her, Gianluca. We've all seen it. Seen what? His eyes locked on her, cold and predatory. The isolation. Sophia stood, her hands flat on the table. You moved her to Chicago from Seattle, away from everyone she knew. You don't let her work. You control her phone, her computer, her mail. You humiliate her at family dinners and then tell her she's too sensitive when she gets upset. That's not protection. That's abuse. The room erupted. Half the family shouted Sophia down. She was out of line, disrespectful, didn't understand the complexities of marriage. The other half went silent, eyes shifting between Gianluca and Bianca, waiting for the matriarch's judgment. Gianluca didn't move, didn't defend himself. That alone was damning. There's another possibility, the voice came from the doorway. Marlo stood there, pale and shaking, one hand pressed against the door frame for support, the other cradling her swollen belly. She wore the hospital gown they'd discharged her in that morning, her blonde hair hanging loose around her shoulders. She looked fragile, broken, perfect. Marlo, Bianca rose immediately. You shouldn't be out of bed. I poisoned myself. The words dropped like stones into water, ripples of shock spreading across every face. Gianluca's expression finally cracked. What? I've been taking small doses of arsenic for 4 months. Marlo's voice was steady despite her body's visible trembling. Measured, controlled. Just enough to show symptoms without harming the baby. I documented everything. Dosages, effects, timelines. I have videos, journals, receipts for the compounds I purchased under. Fake names, and I did it all to prove what everyone in this room has been pretending not to see. She pushed off the doorframe and walked forward, each step deliberate. Sophia moved to help her, but Marlo waved her off. My husband has been psychologically torturing me for 18 months. He isolated me from my family, controlled every aspect of my life, convinced me I was crazy when I questioned his cruelty. And when I got pregnant, it got worse. So I decided to use the one thing your code values above everything else. She stopped in front of Bianca, meeting the older woman's eyes. Protection of family bloodlines. You framed him. Santos' voice held something between horror and admiration. I gave him a choice. Marlo turned to face Gianluca across the table. Christmas Eve, I stood outside your house for 3 hours, pregnant with your child, visibly unwell, and you locked the door. You chose your pride over your family. You violated every rule this organization claims to stand for. Gianluca's hands were fists at his sides. You're insane. No. Bianca's word cut through the tension. She's desperate, and you made her that way. The matriarch walked to Marlo, studying her face with eyes that had seen 50 years of mafia politics, betrayals, and power plays. Show me the proof. Marlo pulled a USB drive from her pocket. Everything's here. The purchases, the planning, the recordings of Gianluca's verbal abuse. Medical research showing the doses were calculated to avoid harming the baby. And security footage from Christmas Eve showing me outside in the snow while he watched from the window and did nothing. She placed it in Bianca's palm. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for divorce, full custody, and enough money to disappear. In exchange, this stays between us. No police, no scandal, no damage to the Fontana name. Her eyes found Gianluca's. You get to keep your empire. I get my freedom and my child's safety. Everyone wins. Except me. Gianluca's voice was quiet, dangerous. You think they'll let this stand? You think admitting you manipulated everyone here makes you trustworthy? I think, Marlo said softly, that I just proved I'm smarter than you. And in this world, that counts for something. The familia stared at her, this woman they'd dismissed as weak, as Gianluca's pretty accessory, as nothing more than a womb carrying the next generation. She'd weaponized their own code against them, turned their traditions into a trap, and walked into their stronghold to negotiate her escape. Bianca closed her fist around the USB drive. We vote at sunset. Until then, Marlowe stays under familia protection. Gianluca, you're confined to your residence. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. The matriarch's eyes were steel. You left your pregnant wife in the snow. Whether she poisoned herself or not doesn't change that fact. The code is clear. Now get out of my sight before I decide. Voting is optional. Gianluca looked around the room, searching for allies. He found none. Even Santo, his most loyal soldier, couldn't meet his eyes. He left in silence. Marlowe's legs finally gave out. Sophia caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her carefully into a chair. The younger woman's whisper was fierce in her ear. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most reckless. Can I be both? Marlowe's smile was faint. The hard part was done. Now she just had to survive the fallout. Outside, car doors slammed. Gianluca was gone, but Marlowe knew the truth that no one else in that room understood. She'd just declared war on the most dangerous man in Chicago. And wars in the mafia world didn't end with votes and handshakes. They ended in blood. The safe house was a lakefront property in Evanston, 40 minutes north of Chicago's heart. Sophia helped Marlowe up the wooden steps, both women moving carefully around the pregnancy belly that seemed to grow heavier by the hour. Inside, 3 Fontana soldiers stood guard, men loyal to Bianca, not Gianluca. You'll be safe here until the vote. Sophia settled Marlowe onto the couch, arranging pillows behind her back. Santos made it clear. Anyone who touches you answers to the entire familia. Marlowe nodded, exhaustion pulling at her bones. The adrenaline from her confession had burned off, leaving her hollow and aching. Her baby kicked insistently against her ribs, a reminder of what was at stake. Do you think they'll vote in my favor? Sophia's hesitation was answer enough. The familia meeting was scheduled for 6 o'clock that evening. 15 members would decide whether Marlowe's claims warranted breaking a marriage contract, something that hadn't happened in the Fontana organization for 23 years. Divorce was weakness. Divorce was scandal. Divorce was admission that they'd failed to protect one of their own. But so was abandoning a pregnant woman in the snow. Marlowe's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at it for 3 seconds before answering. You think you've won. Gianluca's voice was silk over razors. You think exposing me to my family changes anything. It changes everything. Marlowe kept her voice steady, despite the fear crawling up her spine. They know what you are now. They know what you told them I am. There's a difference. Background noise filtered through, traffic, voices, movement. He wasn't at his residence like Bianca had ordered. Self-poisoning, Marlowe? That's your play? You damaged yourself and endangered our child to make me look bad? I protected our child from a father who would have destroyed her. The words came out fierce. You locked me out in freezing weather. That's not manipulation, that's attempted murder by negligence. His laugh was cold. Is it? Or is it a husband tired of his wife's constant dramatics, giving her space to cool down? That's what I'll tell them. That you've been unstable since the pregnancy started. Emotional, irrational, prone to self-harm for attention. The familia already knows you're isolated, friendless, desperate. They'll believe you're mentally ill before they believe I'm cruel. Marlowe's grip tightened on the phone. This was the Gianluca she knew, the one who could twist truth into weapons, who made her question her own reality even when she held the evidence. I have recordings. Edited, probably, or taken out of context. His voice dropped lower, intimate, and threatening simultaneously. You're smart, I'll give you that. Smarter than I credited. But you made one critical mistake, Marlowe. You assumed my family would choose you over me. The line went dead. Marlowe sat frozen, phone trembling in her hand. Sophia appeared in the doorway, concern etched across her features. What did he say? He's going to flip the narrative. Marlowe's mind raced, recalculating probabilities. Make me the villain, the unstable pregnant woman who hurt herself for sympathy. But the evidence can be reframed. Marlo struggled to her feet, ignoring the Braxton Hicks contraction that tightened across her belly. I need to see Bianca before the vote, now. The matriarch's office occupied the third floor of a brownstone in River North. Bianca sat behind a desk that had belonged to her grandfather, surrounded by 70 years of Fontana history. Photographs, newspaper clippings carefully preserved, ledgers from when the organization ran bootleg liquor during Prohibition. She didn't look up when Marlo entered. You should be resting. I should be preparing. Marlo lowered herself into the chair opposite, breathing through another false contraction. Gianluca called. He's planning a counter-narrative. Of course he is. Bianca finally met her eyes. My son is many things, but stupid isn't one of them. He knows the familia values strength, loyalty, tradition. He'll paint you as weak and manipulative. And you'll let him. I'll let the evidence speak. The matriarch pushed a folder across the desk. I watched your recordings, all of them. The verbal abuse, the isolation tactics, the gaslighting. I also reviewed the medical documentation proving you calculated the arsenic doses to avoid harming the baby. Marlo's breath caught. And you're either the most desperate woman I've ever met or the most calculating. Bianca leaned back, studying her. I haven't decided which. Does it matter? Either way, Gianluca violated the code. Don't lecture me about our code, child. The older woman's voice sharpened. I wrote half of it. What Gianluca did was unforgivable. But what you did was unprecedented. You weaponized pregnancy, family honor, and your own body to destroy your husband's reputation. That's not defense. That's warfare. He declared war first. Marlo's hands pressed against her belly, feeling the baby shift and settle. Every time he told me I was crazy. Every time he convinced your family I was the problem. Every locked door, every cruel word. Every moment he made me doubt my own sanity. That was warfare. I just finally fought back. Silence stretched between them. Outside, Chicago's evening traffic hummed. Horns, sirens, the pulse of a city that never stopped moving. There's something you should know. Bianca opened a drawer, pulled out a second folder. This one was older, worn at the edges. You're not the first woman Gianluca has treated this way. Marlo's heart stuttered. What? Before you, there was Catalina Russo. He courted her for 8 months, convinced her to leave her family in New York and move to Chicago. Same pattern. Isolation, control, psychological abuse. She tried to leave twice. Both times, he talked her back, promised to change. What happened to her? Bianca's expression went carefully blank. She disappeared 3 years ago. Officially, she moved to California, cut ties with everyone, but her sister still searches for her, still believes Gianluca had something to do with her vanishing. The room tilted. Marlo gripped the armrests, fighting nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. You think he killed her? I think Catalina knew too much about his business operations and threatened to go to federal investigators. Bianca's voice was clinical, detached. I think my son is capable of eliminating threats, regardless of their gender or his relationship to them. Then why did you let him marry me? The question came out raw, furious. Because I didn't have proof. Because Catalina's disappearance could be explained away. Because sometimes, in this life, you watch and wait for evidence that can't be dismissed. The matriarch's eyes held something that might have been regret. You gave me that evidence, Marlo. Whether you intended to or not, you've exposed what I've suspected for years, that Gianluca inherited his father's ruthlessness, but none of his honor. Marlo's mind spun, reframing everything. She'd thought she was playing one game, but Bianca had been orchestrating another entirely. The vote tonight will go in your favor. Bianca stood, moving to the window overlooking the city lights. I'll make sure of it. But understand something. You've made a powerful enemy. Gianluca won't accept defeat. He'll come for you, for the baby, for everything you're trying to protect. Then what do? You survive. The matriarch turned, and her face was steel, wrapped in silk. And you trust that the Fontana Familia protects its blood. That baby you're carrying, she's one of us now. Which means Gianluca will have to go through every single member of this organization to hurt her. A phone rang, Bianca's private line. She answered, listened, and her expression darkened. When? How many? A pause. Lock it down. No one in or out. She hung up, eyes snapping to Marlowe. We need to move you, now. What's wrong? Someone just tried to breach? The safe house in Evanston. 3 armed men, professional operation. Our guards stopped them, but it's a message. Marlowe's blood turned to ice. Gianluca. Or someone working for him. Bianca grabbed her coat, already moving. Either way, the game just escalated. Welcome to war, Marlowe. Let's make sure you survive it. The emergency meeting convened in the basement of Il Corvo Nero, where concrete walls muffled sound and no windows offered escape routes. Marlowe sat between Bianca and Sophia, acutely aware of the 15 pairs of eyes analyzing her every breath. Her baby kicked frantically, responding to her spiking heart rate. Gianluca stood across the room, perfectly composed, except for the darkness in his eyes that promised retribution. 3 men. Santo dropped photographs on the table. Surveillance shots from the Evanston safe house, bodies in tactical gear, faces obscured. Former military, high-level contractors. They knew exactly where Marlowe was being held. Someone gave them that information. Not someone. Bianca's voice cut through the tension. One of us. Only Familia members knew the safe house location. The room erupted in accusations, denials, anger. Marlowe watched it unfold with growing dread. This was spiraling beyond her control, beyond divorce, beyond escape. She'd triggered something bigger, exposed fault lines in the organization that had been building for years. Enough. Gianluca's single word silenced everyone. He moved to the center of the room, commanding attention with the ease of someone born to power. Let's address the real issue. My wife. He said the word like a curse. Admitted to poisoning herself. To fabricating evidence against me. To manipulating this entire familia into believing I'm some kind of monster. You left her in the snow. Sophia's voice was quiet but unwavering. Pregnant. Unwell. That's not fabrication. We all saw her collapse. After she'd spent months damaging herself to create that exact scenario. Gianluca's gaze swept the room. She's not a victim. She's a con artist who got pregnant to lock down a mafia marriage and realized she couldn't handle the reality of this life. That's not true, Marlowe started. But Bianca's hand on her arm stopped her. Let him speak. He's digging his own grave. Gianluca pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and a voice filled the room. Marlowe's voice. I need something that won't harm the baby but will show symptoms. Something I can control the dosage on. Her blood went cold. That was from 4 months ago, a call to a medical contact she'd trusted. How did he make sure it's traceable? I want them to find it in my system. The recording stopped. The room stared at her. Still think she's innocent? Gianluca's smile was razor sharp. My wife didn't just poison herself accidentally. She planned it, calculated it, used our unborn child as a prop in her scheme to destroy me and take my money. You had me, followed. Marlowe's realization came too late. You've been surveilling me for months. I've been protecting my interests. You're carrying a Fontana heir. Did you think I'd just let you wander Chicago unsupervised? His expression was almost pitying. Every call, every movement, every secret plan you thought you were hiding. I knew about it all. The room shifted. Marlowe felt the change, like a physical blow, doubt creeping into faces that had been sympathetic moments ago. Gianluca had reframed the narrative perfectly. Now she wasn't a desperate abuse victim. She was a calculating manipulator who'd weaponized pregnancy for profit. If you knew. Bianca's voice was deadly calm. Why didn't you stop her? Gianluca turned to his mother. Because I wanted proof. I needed this familia to see exactly what kind of woman I married before I asked for an annulment on grounds of fraud and attempted extortion. Annulment? Marlowe's voice cracked. You can't. The baby will be raised by the Fontana family, where she belongs. You, however, will leave with nothing. He stepped closer, and every instinct screamed at her to run. No money, no custody, no protection. Just the knowledge that you tried to manipulate a mafia organization and failed spectacularly. The code says, Sophia tried to intervene. The code says we protect our blood. Gianluca's eyes never left Marlowe's. That baby is Fontana blood. Her mother is a threat who admitted to self-harm and fabricated abuse allegations. The choice is obvious. Marlowe's hands clenched around her belly. This couldn't be happening. She'd planned everything so carefully, documented every instance of his cruelty, measured every dose to avoid permanent harm, but she'd underestimated him, again. I have recordings, too. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Of you. The things you said, the ways you controlled me. Edited. Taken out of context. Or fabricated entirely, given your demonstrated willingness to deceive. Gianluca addressed the room. Can anyone here trust a woman who poisoned herself? Who used her pregnancy as a weapon? Who admitted to planning this entire scenario for months? The silence was answer enough. Wait! A new voice. Marlowe's head snapped toward the doorway where a woman stood, late 50s, elegant in a dark coat, eyes red from recent crying. Before you vote, there's something you need to know about Gianluca and women who threaten him. Who the hell are you? Gianluca's composure cracked for the first time. Alessia Russo, Catalina's sister. The woman stepped into the light, and Marlowe saw it, the resemblance to the photograph in Bianca's folder. And I have proof that you murdered my sister 3 years ago. The room exploded. Alessia pulled a laptop from her bag, set it on the table, and opened a file. Security footage filled the screen, dated 3 years prior, showing Catalina arguing with Gianluca outside a warehouse. The audio was muffled, but clear enough. I'll tell them everything, the money laundering, the offshore accounts, the federal investigation. You won't tell anyone anything. The video showed Gianluca's hand moving to his jacket. Then static. The footage cut off. Catalina sent this to a cloud server 30 seconds before she disappeared. Alessia's voice shook with controlled fury. Set to auto-release if she didn't check in every 72 hours. But she'd used a service with a glitch. The file got corrupted, trapped in the system. I've spent 3 years recovering it. I finally succeeded last week. Santo was already moving, securing the laptop, pulling up additional files, offshore account records, communication logs, federal surveillance documents showing Catalina had been in contact with the FBI about Gianluca's operations. This is fabricated, Gianluca started. We can verify every timestamp, every metadata point. Santo's voice was flat, professional. If this is real, you didn't just kill a woman. You killed a woman under federal investigation, which means you brought heat onto the entire organization. Bianca stood, her face expressionless. Gianluca Fontana, you're accused of murder, of endangering the familia through reckless violence, and of systematic abuse toward multiple women. How do you answer? For the first time since Marlowe had known him, Gianluca looked uncertain. His eyes darted around the room, finding no allies, no escape. She threatened everything we built. So you killed her. Bianca's words fell like stones, violating every code we stand for, bringing federal attention to our operations. And then you married another woman and started the same pattern of abuse, assuming no one would ever connect the dots. Marlowe watched understanding dawn across the familia's faces. She wasn't an isolated incident. She was proof of a pattern, one that had already claimed at least one life. The vote. Bianca's command silenced all other sounds. Marlowe Hayes Fontana receives full custody of her child, complete financial settlement, and familia protection for life. All in favor? 15 hands rose, every single one. Gianluca Fontana is stripped of his position, his assets, and his family name. He answers to the counsel for Catalina Russo's murder. All in favor? 15 hands, no hesitation. Gianluca's face went white, then red, then something beyond fury. A cold, calculating rage that made Marlowe's skin crawl. You think this is over? His voice was barely human. You think voting against me changes anything? I built this organization into what it is today. Half the revenue comes from operations only I control. You need me. We needed you. Bianca's correction was surgical. Past tense, now we need to survive the damage you've caused. Santo, take him into custody until we determine appropriate consequences. 2 guards moved forward. Gianluca didn't resist. He was too smart for that. But as they led him past Marlowe, he leaned in close enough for only her to hear. Enjoy your victory while it lasts, because the moment I'm free, I'm coming for you and that baby. And no vote, no familia, no code will stop me. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a finality that should have felt like relief. Instead, Marlo felt only the certainty that the real war was just beginning. 3 weeks passed in a haze of security protocols and mounting dread. Marlo stayed in a fortified apartment building owned by the Fontana Familia, guards rotating shifts outside her door 24 hours a day. Her baby dropped lower in her pelvis, preparing for birth that the doctors estimated was now only 2 weeks away. Gianluca sat in a holding facility 40 miles outside Chicago, awaiting trial for Catalina Russo's murder. But Marlo knew better than to feel safe. Men like him didn't stay contained. She was right. The call came at 2 in the morning. Bianca's voice was tight with fury. "He's out." Marlo's blood turned to ice. "How?" "Corrupt guards, a staged medical emergency, a prison transport that never made it to the hospital. We're still piecing it together, but the result is the same. Gianluca is free, and he's coming for you." The baby kicked hard against Marlo's ribs, as if sensing her terror. She pressed a hand to her belly, breathing through the panic. "What do we do?" "Federal witness protection is ready to move you. New identity, new city, complete separation from anything connected to the Fontana name." Bianca's pause carried weight. "But once you enter the program, you can never come back. No contact with anyone from your old life, including me, including Sophia." "And the baby?" "She goes with you. She'll grow up as someone else's daughter, never knowing she was born into the Mafia." The matriarch's voice softened slightly. "It's the only way to keep her safe from Gianluca." Marlo looked around the apartment, the nursery she'd been preparing, the photos Sophia had helped her hang, the first real home she'd felt in 2 years. All of it would disappear. She'd become a ghost, erasing Marlo Hayes from existence to save her daughter. "How long do I have?" "Hours. Pack light. Nothing sentimental. Nothing traceable. The marshals will be there at dawn." The line went dead. Marlo sat in the dark, hands cradling her belly, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. She'd won the vote, exposed Gianluca's crimes, earned the Familia's protection, but she'd forgotten the fundamental truth about men like him. They didn't accept defeat. They escalated. Hit subscribe and let me keep you company with a new story every day. At 4 in the morning, contractions started. Marlo had been packing, carefully selected clothes, fake IDs the marshals had provided, cash and unmarked bills, when the first pain hit. She dismissed it as Braxton Hicks, the false labor that had been plaguing her for weeks. But the second contraction came 12 minutes later, stronger, unmistakable. "No," she spoke to her belly, to the baby who'd chosen the worst possible timing. "Not now. We need 2 more hours. Just 2 more hours." The baby didn't listen. The third contraction came 10 minutes after the second. Marlo called Sophia, not the guards outside her door. If this was real labor, if she was about to give birth, she needed someone who wouldn't report directly to the Familia hierarchy, someone Gianluca couldn't track through official channels. "I'm coming." Sophia's voice was sleep-rough, but immediately alert. "Don't move. Don't call anyone else. I'll be there in 15 minutes. She made it in 12, slipping past the guards with the ease of someone who'd grown up in this world. One look at Marlo's face, and she understood. How far apart? 8 minutes. Another contraction hit, and Marlo gripped the kitchen counter, breathing through it. "The marshals are coming at dawn. I can't have this baby now, Sophia. I can't." Biology doesn't care about schedules. Sophia grabbed Marlo's hospital bag, already packed and waiting. "We need to get you to a secure medical facility. No hospitals. Gianluca will have people watching every maternity ward in the city." Marlo straightened as the contraction faded. "Can we deliver here?" "Are you insane? What if there are complications? What if you hemorrhage? What if the baby?" Sophia stopped, seeing Marlo's expression. "You're serious." "I'm terrified." Marlo's voice broke. "But I'm more terrified of Gianluca finding us before we can disappear. If I go to a hospital, every person who sees me is a potential leak. Here, it's just us and the guards who answer to Bianca." Sophia pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. "My cousin is a midwife, retired, lives off the grid, owes my family favors. If I can get her here, do it." The next 2 hours blurred together. Contractions came faster, 6 minutes, 5, 3. Sophia's cousin arrived with medical supplies that looked like they'd been lifted from a hospital. No questions asked. She examined Marlowe with efficient professionalism and delivered the verdict. "You're 7 centimeters dilated. This baby's coming within the hour, hospital or not." So Marlowe labored in a mafia safe house, while the sun rose over Chicago, while federal marshals prepared documents that would erase her existence, while somewhere in the city her escaped husband hunted for her. The pain was excruciating, waves that built and crested and left her gasping. But worse than the physical agony was the fear. Every sound outside the apartment made her flinch. Every footstep in the hallway could be Gianluca's men. Every second that passed brought her closer to both salvation and disaster. "I can't do this." She gasped the words between contractions. "I can't." "You are doing this." Sophia gripped her hand, fierce and unwavering. "You survived Gianluca's abuse. You poisoned yourself to save your baby. You exposed a murderer to his own family. You can survive childbirth." Marlowe wanted to believe her. But as another contraction tore through her body, as she felt her daughter moving down the birth canal, all she could think was, what if he finds us before she's born? What if I die here and my baby becomes his prisoner? The darkest thought came then, the one she'd been suppressing for months. What if I made a terrible mistake? What if fighting back was worse than enduring? Then the baby crowned, and there was no more time for fear. The baby girl entered the world screaming defiance at 6:47 a.m. Marlowe held her daughter for the first time, 8 pounds of perfect fury, dark hair plastered to her tiny skull, eyes squeezed shut against the brightness, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not just love, purpose. "She's healthy." The midwife wrapped the baby in blankets, her movements practiced and sure. 10 fingers, 10 toes, strong lungs. "You did well, Marlowe." Sophia was crying, laughing, taking photos on her phone that she'd have to delete later. "She's beautiful. God, she looks just like—" "Don't." Marlowe's voice was sharp. "Don't say she looks like him. She's mine. Only mine." The door burst open. The guards, 2 men who'd been stationed outside, rushed in with weapons drawn. Behind them, Santo Messina, his face grave. "We have a problem." His eyes found the baby, and something flickered across his expression. Regret, maybe, or resignation. "Gianluca knows you're here." The room went silent except for the baby's soft mewling. "How?" Sophia's question was barely a whisper. "Someone in the Familia leaked your location. We don't know who yet, but Gianluca's already moving. He'll be here within 20 minutes. Santo's gaze shifted to Marlowe. "The marshals are waiting 3 blocks away. We can get you out through the service entrance, but we need to move now." Marlowe looked down at her daughter, this tiny person she'd carried for 9 months, poisoned herself to protect, nearly died bringing into the world. The baby's eyes opened, dark and unfocused, searching for her mother's face. "I can't run anymore." The words surprised her as much as everyone else in the room. "Marlowe," Sophia started. "No." Marlowe struggled to sit up, every muscle in her body screaming protest. The midwife tried to stop her, but she pushed past the pain. "I've been running since I married Gianluca, running from his abuse, his control, his threats. And now I'm supposed to run for the rest of my life, change my name, hide my daughter, live in fear that he'll find us. That's how witness protection works." Santo tried to explain. "I know how it works." Marlowe's voice was steel-wrapped in exhaustion. "You disappear, you become someone else. You spend every day looking over your shoulder, wondering if today's the day he tracks you down. That's not survival. That's just a different kind of prison." She looked at Sophia, then Santo, then the guards who'd protected her for 3 weeks. "I poisoned myself to frame Gianluca. I exposed him to his own family. I survived his escape and his threats and childbirth in a safe house. You know what that taught me?" The baby whimpered, and Marlowe adjusted her hold, natural and instinctive. "I'm not weak. I'm not a victim. I'm a woman who brought down a mafia boss, using nothing but careful planning and the Fontana Code against him." Her eyes blazed with something beyond fear, determination, fury, certainty. "So instead of running, I'm going to end this. Today. Now." "You just gave birth," the midwife protested, "which means I have about 15 minutes before the adrenaline wears off and I collapse." Marlo looked at Santo. Call Bianca. Tell her I'm invoking familiar protection for my daughter under the blood code. And tell her I'm offering Gianluca a deal. Santo's eyes widened. You can't negotiate with him. I can. Because I have the one thing he wants more than revenge. She glanced down at the baby. His heir, his daughter. The next generation of Fontana blood. Understanding dawned across Sophia's face. You're going to use the baby as leverage. I'm going to give him a choice. Marlo's voice was calm, measured, deadly. He can have his freedom and his life, or he can have his daughter. Not both. If he comes for us, if he tries to take her or hurt me, Bianca strips him of all familia ties and turns him over to federal authorities for Catalina's murder. He gets life in prison with no protection, no money, no power. But if he walks away, he gets to live. He keeps whatever assets Bianca didn't seize. He disappears from our lives forever, and we don't testify against him. Marlo met Santo's gaze. That's the deal. Make the call. Santo hesitated for 3 seconds. Then he pulled out his phone. 10 minutes later, Bianca's voice filled the room via speakerphone. This is insane, Marlo. You're gambling everything on Gianluca choosing freedom over his daughter. No. Marlo adjusted the baby against her chest, feeling the tiny heartbeat sync with her own. I'm gambling that Gianluca values power more than family, and I'm betting I'm right. And if you're wrong, then I die and you raise my daughter according to the blood code. Either way, she's protected. Either way, I'm not running anymore. Silence stretched across the line. When Bianca spoke again, her voice carried something that might have been respect. I'll make the offer, but understand. If Gianluca rejects it and comes for you anyway, this ends in bloodshed. Familia Code demands we protect you, which means war with anyone still loyal to him. I understand. Then God help us all. The call ended. Marlo sat in the sudden quiet, holding her daughter, waiting for the answer that would determine both their futures. Sophia knelt beside her, tears streaming. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or you've lost your mind. Maybe both. Marlo smiled, tired and true. But I'd rather bet on myself than spend my life hiding. Outside, Chicago woke to another winter morning. Inside, a new mother waited to face the monster she'd married, armed with nothing but a newborn baby and the desperate hope that even monsters valued their own survival more than revenge. The phone rang. Santo answered, listened, and his expression shifted from tense to shocked. He accepted. Marlo's breath released in a rush she hadn't realized she'd been holding. What are the terms? He leaves Chicago today. Gives up all claims to you and the baby. Never contacts either of you again. In exchange, you don't testify about Catalina's murder, and Bianca releases his frozen assets, enough to disappear and start over somewhere the familia doesn't operate. And if he breaks the agreement, Bianca turns over everything to federal prosecutors and puts a contract out on him. Every mafia organization from New York to Los Angeles will be hunting him. Marlo looked down at her daughter, this tiny miracle who'd been born into violence but would grow up free of it. Then it's over. It's over, Santo confirmed. But as the baby's fingers wrapped around Marlo's thumb, as Sophia collapsed in relieved sobs, as the guards finally relaxed their weapons, Marlo felt the truth settle in her bones. It wasn't over, it was beginning. A new life, a new identity, not forced by witness protection, but chosen by her own determination. A future where she wasn't Gianluca Fontana's abused wife, but her daughter's fierce protector. She'd walked through fire to get here, and she'd emerged not as a victim, but as a survivor who'd rewritten her own ending. The baby yawned, already falling asleep against her mother's heartbeat. Marlo whispered the words like a promise. You're safe now, we both are. And for the first time in 2 years, she believed it. Hit subscribe and let me keep you company with a new story every day. 6 months later, Marlo stood in a kitchen that smelled like fresh coffee and baby formula, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked Portland's tree-lined streets. The apartment was small but hers, paid for with the settlement Bianca had negotiated, far from Chicago's shadows and Gianluca's reach. Her daughter, Isabella, the name she'd chosen herself, no Fontana approval required, sat in a bouncer, making the cooing sounds that preceded actual words. 6 months old, already trying to grab everything in sight, already showing signs of the fierce determination she'd inherited from her mother. The doorbell rang. Marlowe's hand instinctively moved to the knife block before she caught herself. Old habits. She checked the security camera, a precaution she'd never stopped taking, and her breath caught. Sophia Messina stood on her doorstep, alone, carrying a pink gift bag. Marlowe opened the door, slowly. "You found me. Bianca gave me your address." Sophia's smile was tentative, hopeful. "She thought you might be ready for visitors. But if you're not, I can leave." "No." Marlowe stepped back, letting her in. "I'm glad you're here." They sat in the living room while Isabella entertained herself, and Sophia caught Marlowe up on 6 months of Famiglia news. Santo had taken over Gianluca's former territory, running it with a fairness that had surprised everyone. 3 members who'd been loyal to Gianluca had left the organization, relocated to different cities, different lives, and Bianca was slowly reforming the Familia's operations, cleaning out corruption and violence in favor of legitimate businesses. And Gianluca, Marlowe had to ask, even though part of her didn't want to know. Sophia's expression darkened. He violated the agreement. Marlowe's heart stopped. "What?" 2 months ago, he tried to contact you through an intermediary, someone who owed him money and was stupid enough to accept the job. Sophia met her eyes. Santo found out before the contact was made. The intermediary is no longer a problem. And Gianluca? She paused. Bianca turned over everything to federal prosecutors. He was arrested in Mexico City 3 weeks ago. Murder charges, racketeering, money laundering. He's looking at life without parole. The news should have brought relief. Instead, Marlowe felt hollow. "So it's really over." "It's really over." Sophia reached across and squeezed her hand. "He can't hurt you anymore. He can't hurt Isabella. You're free." Free. The word tasted strange. Marlowe had spent so long fighting, surviving, protecting, that she'd forgotten what freedom actually meant. Isabella made a fussing sound, and Marlowe scooped her up automatically, settling the baby against her chest with the practiced ease of 6 months' experience. The weight felt right, perfect. Like this was what she'd been meant to do all along, not be Gianluca Fontana's wife, but Isabella's mother. "She's beautiful," Sophia whispered, tears in her eyes. "Can I?" Marlowe handed her daughter over, watching Sophia cradle Isabella with the tenderness of someone who understood exactly how precious this life was. The baby studied Sophia's face with intense concentration, then smiled, her first real smile for anyone besides Marlowe. "She likes you." "She has good taste," Sophia laughed, but it was watery. "I've missed you. We all have. Bianca asks about you constantly. How is she?" "Stronger than ever, rebuilding the Familia into something that actually honors the code instead of just paying lip service to it." Sophia looked up from Isabella. "She wanted me to tell you, you're always welcome back. Not to the life, but to the family. The women who actually matter. You did something no one else had the courage to do. You stood up to Gianluca and won. That means something." Marlowe felt emotions she'd been suppressing for months rise to the surface. Grief for what she'd lost, anger at what she'd endured, gratitude for what she'd survived. "I can't come back, not yet, maybe not ever. This place, this life." She gestured around the apartment. "It's mine. I built it. No one controls it but me." "I understand," Sophia returned Isabella, who immediately nestled into her mother's arms. "But know that you have a family, Marlowe. Not the mafia kind, the real kind. Women who would do anything to protect you and this little girl." They spent the afternoon together. Coffee, conversation, Sophia meeting all of Isabella's developmental milestones with appropriate enthusiasm. When she left, she hugged Marlowe tight enough to crack ribs. "You're a survivor," Sophia whispered. "Don't ever forget that." That night, after Isabella was asleep in her crib, Marlowe sat at her laptop and did something she'd been avoiding for 6 months. She opened a blank document and started typing. Not her story, not yet. She wasn't ready for that, but a story, fiction, she told herself. A thriller about a woman who escaped an abusive marriage and rebuilt her life from nothing. The words flowed like they'd been waiting for permission. 3 hours passed before she looked up, surprised to find she'd written 12 pages. Good pages. raw and honest and real in ways she'd never allowed herself to be during the marriage. Writing felt like breathing after holding her breath for years. She saved the document, titled it Survivor, and made a promise to herself that she'd finish it, not for publication or profit, but for proof. Proof that she'd made it through the darkness and come out the other side intact. Isabella cried from the nursery, the soft whimper that meant she needed comfort, not food. Marlowe went to her, lifted her daughter from the crib, and settled into the rocking chair they'd found at a secondhand store. "Your grandmother wanted to meet you," she whispered, rocking gently. "The good one, Bianca. Not your other grandmother. She didn't approve of your father marrying someone outside the familia. But Bianca, she fought for us. She made sure we were protected even when everyone else wanted to look away." Isabella's eyes were already closing, lulled by the motion and her mother's voice. "You're going to grow up different from me," Marlowe continued. "You're going to know you're loved. You're going to have choices. You're going to understand that no man, no person, gets to control you or hurt you or make you doubt your own worth." Her voice caught. "And if anyone ever tries, I'll teach you what I learned. You fight back. You survive. You win." The baby's breathing deepened into sleep, but Marlowe kept rocking, kept whispering her truths into the darkness. "I poisoned myself to save you. I brought down a mafia boss. I survived childbirth in a safe house and negotiated with criminals and walked away from everything I knew." She pressed a kiss to Isabella's forehead. "And I'd do it all again. Every terrifying moment. Because you were worth it." Outside, Portland's night sounds filtered through the windows. Cars, distant music, the ordinary chaos of people living their lives. Marlowe listened and felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years settle in her chest. Peace, not the absence of fear. She'd never fully lose that vigilance, that awareness that danger could return. But the knowledge that she'd faced the worst possible version of her life and emerged victorious. She'd won, not because Gianluca was in prison or because the familia had protected her, or because she'd received a settlement. She'd won because she was sitting here in a home she'd chosen, holding a daughter who would grow up free, writing stories that proved she'd survived. That was the real victory, the one no one could take away. Marlowe carried Isabella back to the crib, tucked her in with the gentleness of someone who understood exactly how fragile and fierce love could be. Then she returned to her laptop and kept writing, the words spilling out like a river that had finally found its path. Tomorrow she'd take Isabella to the park, maybe call her own mother, the relationship she'd been rebuilding slowly, carefully. After Gianluca had isolated her from her family, maybe finish another chapter of her book. But tonight she wrote, and in the writing she found the final piece of healing she'd been searching for, the story of the woman who refused to stay broken. 1 year later, on a crisp December morning, Marlowe pushed Isabella's stroller through Portland's Saturday market, breathing in cinnamon and roasted nuts and the sharp winter air. Her daughter, 14 months old now, walking more than she crawled, pointed at everything with chubby fingers and narrated the world in sounds that almost resembled words. "Da," Isabella declared, pointing at a vendor selling handmade ornaments. "That's right, decorations." Marlowe smiled, the expression coming easier now, more natural. Almost Christmas. 2 Christmases ago, she'd collapsed in the snow outside Gianluca's mansion, 7 months pregnant and poisoning herself to survive. 1 Christmas ago, she'd spent the holiday in this same city, alone with a 6-month-old, still looking over her shoulder every time someone walked too close. This Christmas, she was free. Her phone buzzed, a text from her literary agent, the one she'd acquired 3 months ago when her manuscript caught the attention of a small publisher. "Publishing house wants to move up your release date, January instead of March. They think the timing is perfect. Thoughts?" Marlowe stared at the message, heart racing. Her book, Survivor, the fictionalized account of escaping domestic abuse, was actually going to exist in the world. Women would read it, maybe see themselves in the protagonist, maybe find the courage to leave their own dangerous situations. She typed back, "Let's do it." "Big news, baby girl." Marlowe crouched down to Isabella's level. "Mama's book is coming out. You're going to grow up with a mother who turned her trauma into something that helps people." Isabella responded by trying to eat a pine cone she'd found on the ground. Marlowe gently extracted it, laughing at the absurdity of balancing profound life moments with toddler chaos. They bought hot chocolate, Marlowe's spiked with peppermint, Isabella's just warm milk in a sippy cup, and found a bench overlooking the city. The Cascade Mountains rose in the distance, snow-capped and eternal. Marlowe's phone rang, Bianca's number. She answered, prepared for news about the Familia, maybe another update about Gianluca's trial. Instead, the matriarch's voice carried something unexpected. Warmth. I wanted to call before you saw it on the news. Gianluca's sentencing was this morning. Marlowe's hand tightened on the phone. And? Life without parole. 3 consecutive life sentences for murder, racketeering, and witness tampering. Bianca paused. He'll die in prison, Marlowe. He'll never touch you or Isabella. It's truly over. Relief crashed through her like a wave. Thank you for everything you did. Don't thank me. You saved yourself. I just made sure the Familia honored its obligations. Another pause. Sophia wants to visit again, and I'd like to meet my granddaughter, if you'll allow it. Marlowe looked at Isabella, who was watching a dog with intense fascination. This child would grow up knowing her grandmother, not as a mafia matriarch, but as family. Chosen family, the kind built on respect and genuine care instead of obligation. We'd like that. Bianca's exhale carried years of tension. Christmas week, I'll come to Portland. Just me, no guards, no Familia business. A grandmother visiting her granddaughter. Christmas week, Marlowe confirmed. They said goodbye, and Marlowe sat holding her daughter, processing the enormity of it all. 2 years ago, she'd been trapped in a marriage that was slowly destroying her. She'd made the impossible choice to poison herself, to weaponize her own suffering, because it was the only way out she could see. Now she was sitting in a city she'd chosen, with a daughter who would never know her father's cruelty, about to publish a book that turned pain into purpose. And the man who'd tried to break her was locked away forever, unable to hurt anyone else. We made it, she whispered to Isabella. We actually made it. Isabella looked up at her mother with eyes that held complete trust, complete love. She reached up with both hands, the universal toddler demand for being held. Marlowe lifted her, settling Isabella on her hip with the practiced ease of a mother who'd learned to do everything one-handed. They swayed together, a small dance in the winter marketplace, surrounded by strangers living their own complicated lives. A year ago, Marlowe would have been scanning those strangers for threats, for anyone who might recognize her, might report back to Gianluca. Now she just saw people, parents with their children, couples holding hands, elderly vendors selling their crafts. The ordinary beauty of a world that kept turning regardless of individual tragedies. You know what I learned? Marlowe said to Isabella, who was trying to grab her mother's earring. That surviving isn't the same as living. I spent so long just trying to survive. The marriage, the abuse, the pregnancy, that I forgot what living actually felt like. She walked them back through the market, past vendors selling handmade soaps and vintage books and holiday cookies. She bought Isabella a wooden toy shaped like a bird, watched her daughter's face light up with pure joy at this simple gift. But now, Marlowe continued, now I'm living, writing my book, raising you, building friendships with people who actually care about me. Sophia's visiting next month. Your grandmother Bianca is coming for Christmas. And your other grandmother, my mother, wants to spend New Year's with us. Isabella chewed on the wooden bird, satisfied. You're going to grow up surrounded by strong women, Marlowe promised. Women who fought for themselves and each other. Women who refused to accept the limitations other people tried to place on them. They reached the car, a used sedan Marlowe had bought with her settlement money. Nothing fancy but reliable and safe. She strapped Isabella into the car seat, double-checking the buckles the way she always did, the way she always would. As she drove home through Portland's decorated streets, past houses wrapped in lights and families visible through windows, Marlowe felt something she'd stopped believing was possible. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of someone trying to escape, but the quiet, solid hope of someone who'd already escaped and was building something beautiful from the wreckage. That evening, after Isabella was asleep, Marlowe opened her laptop and wrote the dedication for her book. For every woman who's ever doubted her strength. You're stronger than you know. You're braver than you believe. and you deserve a life built on love, not fear. This is your permission to fight back. This is your reminder that surviving is just the beginning. Living is what comes after. And for Isabella, you were worth every risk. You were worth everything. She saved the file, feeling the rightness of it settle in her bones. This book would go out into the world carrying her truth. Disguised as fiction, maybe, but true in all the ways that mattered. Her phone lit up with messages, Sophia sending photos of her new apartment, Bianca confirming flight details for Christmas, her agent sharing early buzz about the book from advance readers, her mother sending a video of herself practicing lullabies to sing to Isabella. Marlowe read each message, responded with genuine warmth, and marveled at this life she'd built, a life where people communicated because they wanted to, not because they were checking up on her or controlling her movements, a life where she made decisions about her own time, her own body, her own future. Freedom tasted like possibility. Before bed, she checked on Isabella one more time, the nightly ritual she'd never skip. Her daughter slept with the wooden bird clutched in one tiny fist, peaceful and perfect and completely safe. "Sweet dreams, baby girl," Marlowe whispered. "Tomorrow we're going to the library and the park, and maybe we'll bake cookies, even though you'll probably just make a mess. We're going to live a completely ordinary, wonderfully boring day, because we can." She returned to her own room, to the bed she'd chosen, in the apartment she'd selected, in the city where no one knew her history unless she chose to share it. And as she drifted to sleep, Marlowe thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, terrified, isolated, desperate enough to poison herself because she couldn't see any other way out. That woman had been brave in ways she didn't recognize at the time. She'd been strategic and fierce and willing to risk everything for a chance at freedom. But that woman was also gone, transformed into someone new, someone who'd walked through fire and emerged not just intact, but stronger, someone who'd turned trauma into triumph, suffering into story, fear into fierce determination to live fully. Marlowe Hayes, no longer Fontana, never again defined by that name, fell asleep smiling. She'd survived. She'd won. And now, finally, she was free to simply live. The future stretched ahead, full of ordinary days and extraordinary possibilities, full of her daughter's laughter and her own words on published pages and friendships built on truth instead of fear. It was everything she'd fought for, everything she deserved, everything she'd almost stopped believing was possible, and it was just the beginning. Thank you so much for sticking around and showing me so much love and support. You have no idea how much it means to me. If this story resonated with you, then hit that subscribe and like button right now.